I work full-time. My husband is unemployed. So I gave him an ultimatum: become a house husband or we are getting divorced. Long story short, my husband, 37M, used to work to support the family while I, 36F, stayed home taking care of our 2-year daughter. Last month, he lost his job and told me he felt exhausted and wasn't eager to do anything. I said okay and offered to work so he could look after our daughter at home and get some rest until he feels better. By the way, our daughter goes to daycare, so it's mainly some housework and picking her up. But he said no, he needs his time to be completely free. I got furious because this means either I work while also taking care of our daughter, or our family will face significant financial pressure. But I stepped back anyway and had a hell of a month doing everything while he hung out with his friends and played PS5. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and told him he had to choose between being a house husband or divorce. He chose the first, but it felt forced. I keep questioning myself. Was I too harsh? Any good advice would be appreciated. Edit. I never thought this would draw so much attention. I'm trying to read as many comments as I can, and I really appreciate your opinions, especially those pointing out things I should have told him and I didn't. I've decided to show him the post after work and see if we can have a real talk based on that. Again, thank you all. Relevant comments. Commenter. NTA giving him the month was super generous. OP. He was the one who supported the family before. I thought I'd give him time to recover. I was wrong. Commenter. NTA, but once you have a job and health insurance, insist he get therapy. It might be burnout or depression, but he needs to seek help. You can enable him to sink into it. OP. Thank you. I didn't think of that, but he seemed really happy playing with his friend. Is it normal? Commenter. Yes, when I get depressed I can still read, but I don't really want to do anything else. Video games, binge watching shows, reading, food can all give us a dopamine hit that may make us feel normal. It is important to call out the behavior and make sure he is attempting to get better. Part of it might be the ego hit from getting let go from his job. The important thing is to not let it go untreated/unremarked too long. Tell him adulting sucks, but we all have to do it. Update 1. I, 36F, showed my husband, 37M, the last post, and we had a talk. Then, without asking me, he invited my mother-in-law to come, even though he knows I've never gotten along well with her. So, I got off work, picked up my daughter, and showed my husband the post after she fell asleep. I told him that millions had seen it and made various points. I admitted that my ultimatum was an impulsive reaction and that I preferred having a calm discussion to work through this. He said he was surprised I shared family matters online and that he wouldn't have done it. He said he wasn't feeling depressed, just tired and exhausted after years of working, and he just wanted to be childish for a bit and really enjoyed the month off. I kind of understood because we used to travel a lot before our daughter was born, and life has been harder since then. I told him I wouldn't force him to work and that he could take his time as long as he could pick up our daughter and do the housework. He hesitated but told me not to worry. I thought this was the end of it. Then, the next day, I came home from work to find his mother there. I was shocked because he hadn't told me anything. She started picking up our daughter and doing the housework. This is driving me crazy because I have never gotten along with her well, and my husband knows this. I feel like he asked her to come so he could continue being childish, disregarding how I feel. His mother raised him as a single mom, and according to my husband, she was very protective and planned to live with him for his whole life. He felt suffocated, so he went to a university far from home and reduced contact with her. I remember one time she came and got sick, vomited, and I cleaned up her mess. Suddenly, she asked her son to come and told him that her underwear was dirty and needed to be washed by hand that very night, even though we had a washing machine. My husband and I had agreed that our marriage was ours and that she wouldn't come and live with us. He broke his promise. I'm considering divorce, but I'm worried our daughter is too young to understand it. I've thought about holding on for a while, but these days of living with her are already driving me crazy, and I don't see a quick end. I've thought about being an AH and forcing her to leave, but that might lead to divorce. I really need some advice. Thank you all. Relevant comments. Commenter. So, you tell him he needs to pull his weight as an adult, and his answer is to literally call his mommy to do the work for him? If he wants to be a child so badly, you really need to pack him up and send him back home with his mommy so she can baby him the way you will, and should not. Not to mention that you're the breadwinner and can't stand this woman. Put your foot down and get both out of the house. You gave him an ultimatum. He woefully failed it. Now, you need to follow through with the other half of it and bring out the consequences. OP. I know this could be the final solution. Thank you. Commenter. And if you stay, You will teach your daughter to also choose a man who mistreats her. Imagine your daughter married to a man just like her dad with an MIL just like yours, and then make your decision. OP, I would hate myself if this scenario really happens. You have a point. Thank you. Commenter, what can you tell us about his mom? Doesn't she understand what you're going through given that she's a single mother? And why don't you get along with? Any personal reason? OP, he and I have knew her mother would do anything to be with him, and he have chosen to go for it. This sucks. I don't want to fight with my MIL constantly for having my husband. The husband's post. The husband made a post of his own. Husband, Ada for asking my mother to live with us to call my wife's bluff after she posted our family matters online. I found out my wife posted about our situation on Reddit, so I thought I should share my side too. I lost my job in May and wanted some free time because life after having a baby feels suffocating. I've always been a free spirit, working and traveling, and then I met my wife, Jay. This lifestyle continued, and we traveled a lot, from Tibet to Antarctica. I was a seller, and she had a great business selling replica bags, making enough for us to enjoy our lives. We hit it off, got married, and had a great time together. We even considered being child-free and consulted an older couple on an Antarctic cruise, whose happiness convinced me this could be our future. The thing is, my mom really wanted a grandchild. At the time, I didn't think much of it and felt it wasn't a big deal. So I discussed it with my wife, and we decided to go ahead. Her pregnancy was tough. She had severe morning sickness, and I felt really sorry for her. After the baby was born, she wanted to focus on the baby, and I agreed to hold the family burden alone. Life then became all about work, with no more traveling or other interesting stuff. So last month, I had enough. No more working, no more baby duties, and we agreed to give me a trial break. The past month was quite healing until one day she got mad and suddenly gave me an ultimatum of divorce. I didn't want a divorce, so I started doing housework, which I wasn't prepared for. Then last week, my wife came home and asked me to talk, showing me her post about us in this sub. She said millions of people had read it and called me an immature AH. I was pretty upset and asked my mother to help with the housework so my wife would be relieved and, to be honest, to call her bluff. She's not happy, of course, and neither am I. We've barely talked since then, kind of a cold fight. These days, I've caught her several times watching her phone for a long time and sometimes crying. I believe she posted about us again, and I've been waiting for her to talk even though I wanted to start the conversation but got cold feet feeling the tension in the family. Writing this is easier. So here I am. This is my first and last post about it. I just want to share my side of the story. And Jay, if you see this, I'm ready to talk anytime. Update 2. I've been hesitating because we had a great time, and I have been loving you. I didn't talk to you these days because I wanted to see if you would send your mother home and talk. I update now because, as you said in the post, I see you and want everyone, especially those who told me you might have been depressed, to see you. I can't believe you'd rather defend yourself online than talk to me face to face. If that's how it is, let's do this. Update 3. I talked with my psychologist and then talked with my attorney. After my last post, I was in a weird state. I felt trapped in a limbo where talking to my husband seemed futile, but the thought of divorce felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my throat, making me hard to breathe. I decided to make an appointment with my psychologist, who has known my childhood and understands my background, including my adoption and family dynamics. Yes, I am adopted. Although my adoptive parents treated me very well, I generally don't like to talk about it. Before I had my child, I specifically consulted the psychologist because I was afraid that my unresolved issues might unconsciously affect my daughter. So, during our conversation, she pointed out that the child in me desperately longs for my biological parents, while the love for my adoptive parents makes me reject this idea. As a result, I am obsessed with maintaining the ideal biological family that I never had. This insight resonated deeply, making me realize why I had delayed taking decisive action for so long. After our session, I felt a strong urge to speak with an attorney about divorce. I wanted to prioritize my daughter's future over my illusory family unity. I gave the attorney all the necessary information and expressed my desire for a quick resolution. She informed me that the process could be completed in as little as a week if my husband agreed to cooperate, although it might take longer otherwise. She recommended that I discuss the matter with him to facilitate the process. So I have been planning in my mind to choose a day to confront him. During this period of hesitation, I came home one day to find that my mother-in-law had left. My husband had prepared dinner and apologized for his behavior. He admitted to being childish and expressed deep regret for his actions, acknowledging the negative feedback he received on Reddit. Realizing that so many people found his behavior unacceptable, he understood that he had been in the wrong. I reiterated that divorce might be the best option as I couldn't see a way forward together. In response, he handed me a letter taking full responsibility for the problems in our marriage and admitting his mistakes. He asked for one final chance to prove himself as a good husband and father, promising that if he failed, I could use the letter to proceed with the divorce at any time. After much hesitation, I agreed to give him this last chance and informed my attorney to hold off on the divorce proceedings for now. Although my attorney mentioned that the letter had no legal standing, she assured me she could handle the situation with or without it. For now, I'm cautiously optimistic, willing to see if my husband's efforts will lead to genuine change. If things don't improve, I'm prepared to take further steps to ensure my daughter grows up in a healthy and loving environment. I believe the decision is in my hands, and I am now determined to do what's best for my family. Update 4. Well, it's been a roller coaster these past few weeks. Just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, they did. After I decided to give my husband one last chance, he really seemed to step up. He took over more household chores, started picking up our daughter from daycare, and even tried to cook a few meals. I could see he was making an effort, and for a moment, I thought maybe this was the turning point we needed. Then, one evening, he dropped a bombshell. We were having dinner one of his attempts at homemade lasagna, which was surprisingly decent. He looked at me with a mix of determination and anxiety. "I've been thinking," he started, "about what you said, about me being childish and not pulling my weight. And you're right, but there's more to it. I need to find myself again. I need to do something that makes me feel alive." I was cautiously optimistic, waiting for him to continue. "I want to start my own business," he said. "I've always wanted to open a coffee shop, a place where people can come, relax, and enjoy themselves. I've been researching, and I think I can make it work, but I need your support." I didn't know what to say. On one hand, I admired his ambition and the idea of him doing something productive. On the other hand, the financial risk seemed daunting, especially since we were still trying to get back on our feet. We talked it over, and I agreed to give it a shot, under the condition that he'd continue to help out at home and make sure our daughter remained a priority. He agreed, and we started working on a business plan together. Days turned into weeks, and the coffee shop idea began to take shape. He found a small location not far from our home, and we started the process of securing a lease and gathering the necessary permits. He was excited, more motivated than I'd seen him in months, and it was contagious. I started to believe that maybe this was exactly what he needed. But then, life threw another curveball. One evening, as I was putting our daughter to bed, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, expecting a delivery or maybe a neighbor. Instead, I found a woman standing there, looking nervous and out of place. "Hi, is your husband home?" she asked. I frowned, confused. "Who are you?" "My name is Amanda," she said. I'm an old friend of his. We need to talk." I let her in, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I called my husband into the living room, and when he saw her, his face went pale. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice shaky. "We need to talk," she repeated, glancing at me. "All of us." She told us a story that sounded like something out of a soap opera. She and my husband had dated briefly years before we met, and she'd recently discovered that she had a son, a 7-year-old boy who she believed might be his. She had tried to track him down, but had only recently found him through social media. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. This was too much. I couldn't process it all at once. My husband denied it at first, saying it wasn't possible. But as Amanda showed him pictures of the boy, and as the resemblance became undeniable, he went silent. He agreed to take a paternity test, which only confirmed what Amanda had told us. The boy was his son. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. This revelation shook our already fragile marriage to its core. I didn't know how to deal with it. My husband tried to reassure me, saying he didn't know about the child and that he wanted to make things right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives had become an unpredictable mess. Amanda wasn't looking for money or support. She just wanted her son to know his father. My husband promised to be there for him, and I had to decide if I could accept this new reality. I felt overwhelmed, torn between my desire to keep our family together and my frustration with the never-ending complications. We decided to seek counseling, hoping to navigate this new challenge with some professional help. Our first session was tense, with both of us airing our grievances and fears. The counselor suggested that we take things one step at a time, focusing on rebuilding trust and communication. I agreed to give it a try, but my patience was wearing thin. The coffee shop, the unexpected child, the constant stress was all too much. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of responsibilities and emotions. The days passed, and the situation remained complicated. My husband tried to balance his time between the coffee shop, our daughter, and his newfound son. Amanda was surprisingly understanding, but I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy and resentment every time he went to spend time with the boy. One night, after another exhausting day, I sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much more I could take. My husband sat beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know this is hard, but I'm trying to make it right. For us, for our family." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without breaking down. The truth was, I didn't know if I could keep going like this. I didn't know if our marriage could survive this storm. As I lay in bed that night, my mind racing with thoughts of divorce, of starting over, of what was best for our daughter, I realized that the future was more uncertain than ever. And as much as I wanted answers, I knew that some things couldn't be resolved overnight. The next morning, I woke up early, the weight of uncertainty heavy on my shoulders. My husband was already up, making breakfast and getting our daughter ready for the day. I watched him from the doorway, feeling a mix of admiration and frustration. Update 5. Life has been a whirlwind since the last time I posted. Things have only gotten more complicated, if that's even possible. After the paternity test confirmed my husband had a son, we decided to take it slow and see how things would unfold. My husband was genuinely trying to juggle his time between the coffee shop, our daughter, and his newfound son, and I was cautiously supportive. But the tension in our home was palpable. The coffee shop was slowly coming together. My husband poured his heart into it, working late nights and early mornings to make it a reality. He was passionate about it, and it was the happiest I'd seen him in a long time. But with this new project came more stress, and our relationship continued to be strained. One evening, while my husband was at the coffee shop, Amanda called. She was frantic, saying something about her son, Alex, not feeling well and asking if my husband could come over. I told her he was working, but she insisted it was urgent. I ended up calling him, and he rushed over to her place. It turned out to be nothing serious, just a mild fever, but the incident highlighted how intertwined our lives had become. I was caught in a web of new responsibilities and emotions, and it was starting to take a toll on me. I felt like I was constantly living in the shadow of my husband's past mistakes. Our counseling sessions helped, but only to a point. The counselor suggested we take a weekend away to reconnect and focus on us. I thought it was a great idea, but finding time was nearly impossible with everything going on. Then, out of nowhere, my husband's estranged father, who he hadn't spoken to in years, showed up at our doorstep. He'd heard through the grapevine about the coffee shop and wanted to reconcile. My husband was taken aback, but agreed to let him stay with us for a few days. I was wary, but I didn't want to add more stress to the situation. His father's arrival stirred up old wounds and new tensions. The house felt crowded, and I was constantly on edge. My husband tried to balance everything, but it was clear he was struggling. His father's presence brought back memories of his tumultuous childhood, and it was affecting him more than he let on. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, my husband and I sat in the kitchen, talking about everything that had happened. He was visibly exhausted, and I could see the weight of it all bearing down on him. "I never wanted any of this," he said, his voice cracking. "I wanted a simple life, with you and our daughter. I didn't expect my past to come crashing back like this." I reached out, holding his hand. "We'll get through this," I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Things came to a head one Saturday morning. My husband's father and Amanda both showed up at the coffee shop's soft opening. Amanda brought Alex, hoping to introduce him to his grandfather. The scene was chaotic, with customers, family members, and emotions all mixing together. I was trying to help out, serving coffee and pastries, when I overheard a heated argument between my husband and his father. They were in the back room, voices rising. "You abandoned us," my husband shouted. "And now you want to play grandpa? It doesn't work like that." His father fired back. "I'm trying to make amends. Can't you see that?" I felt a knot form in my stomach. This was supposed to be a new beginning for us, but it felt like the past was dragging us down. The argument escalated, and before I knew it, my husband stormed out, leaving the coffee shop in chaos. I rushed after him, but he was already gone. I was left to manage the shop, our daughter, and the mess his father and Amanda had created. By the end of the day, I was drained. I finally managed to close up the shop and went home, hoping my husband would be there. He wasn't. I called him several times, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic set in as hours passed with no word from him. Late that night, he finally came home, looking disheveled and defeated. He'd been drinking, something he rarely did. "I can't do this anymore," he said, slumping into a chair. "It's too much." I sat beside him, trying to offer comfort. "We'll figure it out," I said, though I was barely holding it together myself. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Maybe we should just call it quits. I'm dragging you down with me." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to agree, to let go of the constant stress and start over. But another part of me couldn't bear the thought of our family falling apart. We sat in silence, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. Finally, I spoke. "Let's sleep on it. We're both exhausted. We'll talk in the morning." He nodded, and we went to bed, though neither of us slept much. The next day, things were awkward. We went through the motions of daily life, but there was a palpable tension between us. I was on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. That evening, we sat down to talk. My husband apologized for everything, for the stress, the chaos, and the mess our lives had become. He admitted he felt lost and didn't know how to fix things. I confessed my own fears and frustrations, how I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep everything together. We decided to take a break from counseling and focus on communicating better with each other. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. We agreed to keep working on our marriage, for our daughter's sake if nothing else. As we navigated the next few weeks, things slowly started to improve. My husband and his father managed to have a civil conversation, and Amanda and I found a way to coexist without constant tension. The coffee shop was doing well, which was a small but significant victory. But even with these small wins, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on a precipice. Our marriage was fragile, and it wouldn't take much to push us over the edge.